Hey everybody, Bill Gaskins here of Integrity Knows Works. Talking about the OODA loop decision-making tool applied to scent detection team operations. So in this lesson, we'll be talking about several things that I think that are important when it comes to operating as part of a scent detection team. In particular, we'll talk about how important situational awareness is in detection sports, but also with tactical scent detection operations. We're going to talk about some different situational awareness tools, such as Cooper colors, maintaining a growth mindset as a handler, recognition prime decision making. We'll talk into that. We'll also talk about open and closed loop learning and the Tongue effect or Maslow's hammer. We'll also refer to Winthrop theory, and then we'll go through each one of the different parts of the OODA loop. And then finally, we'll spend a little bit of time of, now that we've discussed some of the behavioral science stuff for situational awareness, how you'll take it and apply it to your different searches. So if we look at situational awareness and how we apply it to detection sports, ultimately, we're playing a game of hide and go seek. And what we're looking at is, while the randomness in the outside world plays a large role in our uncertainty about things, it's our inability to properly make sense of what we see that becomes the biggest issue for us as scent detection handlers, be it again for police and military applications or even for scent sport. So when the circumstances change, we fail to shift our perspective and fully be situationally aware. So we need to know what's going on around us. So some things that I think that kind of help with that, something that we talk to military and police dog handlers quite a bit, and police officers more so, is the Cooper's colors or level of awareness. So basically what you want to be, you want to put yourself in a situation where you're prepared, alert, and relaxed, and that you have good situational awareness. So you don't want to be so relaxed that you're not prepared to take action, but you want to be just prepared enough that you're not over prepared in an inability or incapable of acting. So if you really want to simplify it, you want to be situationally aware versus being situationally arrogant or situationally ignorant. You want to be in a position where you're ready to go and able to operate. With that being said, you need to maintain a growth mindset. What often happens for us as handlers or as adult human beings in general is we get into patterns, we get into cycles or ruts. So kind of like you see in the picture here, where you can look at the ruts of the wagons that went across on the Oregon Trail. You get into the rut, you get in the routine, and it's almost like being a train on rails. You stop thinking, you stop being open to what's going on around you and open to the situation as it actually is and as it develops. So you want to know that your mindset is open to new information, to new opportunities. And you want to be in a situation where you don't have a fixed mindset. You're not open to new information, that there's more than one way to do things. An example of this, having a fixed mindset, is the Tongue effect. So when you look at the Tongue effect, it's the negative effect or negative transfer of learning. So basically it's your past experiences predict how you're going to deal with the current situation. So it refers to our predisposition to solve a given problem in a specific manner, even though better or more appropriate methods of solving the problem exist. So like the picture shows here, just trying to be funny, is that no matter what happens, we're going to do things a certain way. And a lot of us in the dog training community get into that. I've always done things a certain way. My experience gets in the way of my ability to make decisions. And so I use that and I get into that rut. I get some stinking thinking and I'm just not able to get out of it. And so some things that you can think about as scent detection teams is always searching areas in just one way. I have a pattern that I search and it will be systematic, but I will always do it a specific way. Well, a way to get out of that is to look at things and be systematic, but search each area as its own specific area. So don't get into the rut, the routine, to where you're so fixated on exactly one way that you're not going to allow yourself to be situationally aware and allow the situation as it is to help you. So something to think about when you look at that is something that's referred to as recognition prime decision making. So in a given situation, you're going to put yourself into an opportunity where you can assess the situation. And if you use the recognition prime decision making, you can stress inoculate your teams and your handlers so that when they have a situation that presents itself, they're able to go, oh, I've been in a similar training situation to this in the past. And that's what recognition prime decision making is in a nutshell. It's basically through experience and training, when you get a situation that presents itself, you're able to make a quicker decision because I've seen this before. You're stress inoculated. When the stressful situation presents itself, you're ready to move because it's something that you've seen before. And ways to get around that too is to look at something like open and closed loop thinking. Basically, if you take OODA, which we'll talk about a little bit more in depth in a minute, and you look at recognition prime decision making, what we're trying to do is create a loop where you're able to flex with the feedback. You want to be able to move to where your knowledge that you have prior to the situation helps you deal with things as they happen. So feedback matters. You want to be able to adjust to the situation as it develops. So as new information comes in, you're able to flex and shift and flow with that new information. And one way to look at that is to look at the situation as it is and the threats. And one tool that's used for that is the Winthrop theory. If we look at the Winthrop theory a little bit more in depth, originally came over or was created in the 1970s by a British Army officer named Lieutenant Winthrop, hence the name, the Winthrop theory. And he wrote a thesis on counter-terrorist searches. And he theorized that you had to think like a terrorist to think how you would hide munitions. And that's what they were dealing with the Irish Republican Army. So if you take this theory and you start to apply it to what we're doing in scent detection operations, they were really looking for different markers or referred to as Winthrop points to be able to guide terrorists. So terrorists would hide things to be able to come back later and recover them. They needed some type of marker or indicator to help them find those things. So as you look at this and you start to think about this a little more and how can it apply to what we do in scent detection training, this is what it is. In particular for the sport community, you want to know the rules. You want to understand the rules of the situation, where the hides will be placed. If the hides, for example, according to the specific element, can't be any higher than 3 feet, don't waste your time searching outside 3 feet. Know the rules. For tactical security, law enforcement, military situations, you want to know the terrorist threat. Don't waste your time searching outside those things. So your knowledge should help you focus your search to productive areas that have a greater likelihood of you encountering odor. So all of this being said is all the stuff that you do prior to the start of your tactical operation or the start of the start line for your sports situation as well, if you're at a trial. So now we're going to get into the OODA loop. As we look at the OODA loop, the first thing as you look at this is, again, it's just a tool. It is a guide for how a lot of people process information. Everyone goes through this, even though you may never have named this process, but now we're going to go ahead and name it for you. So the OODA loop is a representation of the natural decision-making cycle seen in every context. Whether you think about it or not, all your decisions are based on the observations of the evolving situation. And these informations are the raw information based on decisions and actions that you'll base things on. So as the information comes in, you may not know everything about the information that comes in, but you're going to do your level best with what you do see to be able to move from there. So remember, our dogs go through these too. As they take in information, the tactile hairs, their proprioception, their balance, all this stuff will affect them. The odor, the temperature, the humidity, and all those things affect our dogs too. So to go a little bit deeper with this, the first step for the OODA loop is the observation phase, or observe. So effectively observe, you need to have good situational awareness, regardless of the source of our observations. As the information evolves, it can be inconsistent, can be uncertain and incomplete. And it's really dependent on who's doing the observing. your experience, your attitudes, and your recognition prime decision making. Have I seen this before? During trials for the sport community, they have physical or virtual walkthroughs. So these are opportunities to observe search areas to kind of get your bearings. In tactical operations, you might have an overlay, you might use Google Earth or other tools to get a view. You might shoot a drone over the location, lots of different things to help you out. If you have a map, you can kind of start to guide, come up with strategies, get a sense of how things are going. Then you go ahead and take it a little bit further. Your judgment, the true situational awareness is key without judgment. You don't want to judge too harshly. And basically, you want your data that you get, as you do that initial observation, it's just you taking data in. You don't have all of it. Observing, you need to take into account the information about the changing environment and how you can cope with it. And the basic two problems of the observation phase are we have to observe imperfect or incomplete information. It takes into account Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. We can also be inundated with so much information that separating the signal from the noise and really focusing on the thing that's the most important in the situation might be hard to do because of how much information that we have. Now we go into the next part, what's referred to as the center of the loop, or the orientation phase. The goal of the orientation phase is to make sense of our initial observations. This requires our understanding of our observations as a basis for choosing the next best course of action. And understanding is dependent upon our previous experience and how we're trying to make sense of the situation. And we need to fuse our observations with the mental models for how to cope with our understanding. So in other words, if you don't train for the situation, then you have no basis to orient yourself to. Your past experience helps drive the next block as you go through things. But during trials, you want to use those physical and virtual walkthroughs as opportunities to observe search areas, and then orient yourself to what technique you might use. Again, recognition prime decision making. Maybe you searched off leash one search. This next one, you search on leash. So you look at the opportunities, you look at the space, and you determine whether it's too tight, it's open enough, it's controlled enough so you can cut a dog off leash and other things. Also allow your dog at the start line a moment to adjust as they approach the search area. This allows them to observe their surroundings themselves and then orient themselves to the wind direction, the humidity, the light, all the other distractions and things that might be going on in the space. Dogs are item oriented, so they might look for things that are interesting to them to search. So give them a chance to process before you start to search. That's why it's nice to start at the start line or at thresholds to doors and give a dog a second to kind of get themselves ready to go, kind of chill out or get themselves whatever you do for your behavior chain that you've built. This is where it's nice too to develop an "are you ready" or some type of bridge command that lets them know that it's time to get ready to search. So after you move through your observation orientation phase, now you get into the decide. This is your hypothesis. You came up with all that information that you gathered in the observation phase. You oriented yourself to what your perception was of things. And now you have to make a decision for the best course of action with all that information that you have. And again, often that information is imperfect. And so you're just coming up with your best educated guess. And what you want to do too is you want to limit the amount of decisions that a handler has to make. So as you're training, again, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle prevents us from attaining a perfect matchup between our environment and our mental model. So basically, you don't know what you don't know. And so you don't want to also, with Hicks' law, have too many options for a handler. You want some basic things for them to do. So searching in a systematic pattern is great, but they need to be able to adjust to the tactical or trial reality that's on the ground for them, be it for sport or tactical operations. From there, we're going to go a little bit further. We're essentially moving forward with our best hypothesis or our best scientific wild guess or educated guess. We're going to determine which model works best. So we want to decrease the number of choices to where it's possible to just have the Simplest thing, if we have too many options of equally perceived hierarchy, can cause analysis paralysis. So we want to use the KISS principle here. We want to keep it simple, silly. Don't overthink it. As you're developing your situational awareness and choosing which way to do your search, you want to make sure that you have the simplest way there. And then finally, with all the information that you observed, you've oriented yourself to what your perception is of the situation. You've looked at possible courses of action. You decide on one, and then you act. Once you've decided on what you're going to do, now you get to go into determine whether it's going to work. And now we're exercising that hypothesis. Do something. If you want to win, you got to do something, make a decision. And as soon as you make a decision to act on, then you start another OODA loop, and it happens for your dogs too. Dogs go through OODA loops simultaneously with us, and they go through several of their own as they're going through. So dogs are capable of grasping and applying lots of complex concepts, and they function at a higher cognitive level than we've ever understood before. You can talk to lots of folks about that. Cameron Ford talks about this in depth. So don't forget you're a team. You're there to support your dog. As they perceive things, they may decide to go right, even though you may have thought that you needed to go left, and you need to be able to adjust according to what the dog does and support them. So you need to adjust your training and your trialing styles and make sure you're ready to go to support them. Be prepared to adjust all the way throughout. If you're too rigid and not fluid, then you won't be able to deal with things as they change. The key things to take away from this is this. Remember, you'll go through multiple OODA loops throughout your search, and your dog will too. You need to be open to moving and supporting roles. Your dog processes, observes the situation, and as they gather that information, orient themselves, that they decide to go left when you would have thought you should have gone right, and need to be ready for it. When they act, you need to be able to do it. Think about this too. If you step in and you try and fix things and get ahead of your dog, you may interfere with their OODA loop. So as they were processing info, they might have gotten to the aha moment where they have assessed everything, determined where they're going to go, and we're starting to go a certain way, and you stepped in too soon. So ultimately, you need to view changes of behavior as the beginning of a new OODA loop. So when you see that just notable difference in behavior from the last thing that they were doing, you see a good solid change of behavior from what they were doing previously, you need to be open and ready to receive it so that you can adjust to it, because that might be the beginning of a new OODA loop where they've assessed and decide to go a certain way. So you need to be open and prepared for that. So now we've talked about all this science. How do we apply the OODA loop? Well, one thing to think about with applying the OODA loop when it comes to interiors is something like this. When you look at an interior space, you want to observe the space and everything that's in it. You don't want to overlook thresholds first. Never skip through a door. A lot of handlers practice going through doorways. And what you do is you have that negative transfer of learning. I just rush or I blitz through every doorway, and I don't take seriously to have hides there. So as trainers and handlers, we need to prepare our folks for that. But understand all the potential factors that could affect odor in a space like a kitchen. The window that's in this room, the air, the heat from the sun, the fridge, the fan that's underneath the fridge, and the noise and temperature from the fridge, the sink, water temperature and noise, the stove, different odors, the temperature of it, the hood might cause and change airflow, the floors themselves, crumbs, the texture and surface of the floor might affect certain dogs. Some dogs have an issue with slippery floors and not, linoleum and tiles and different things. So you need to be aware from that. So all of those different things could affect how your dog searches. Now moving into exterior place. Again, as you observe the space and everything in it, you want to orient yourself to your surroundings, use the Winthrop theory or the element rules and your training and experience to determine likely productive search areas. In this instance, you look at some productive search areas. It might be underneath the table. Again, dogs are item oriented, so they'll see the tables and chairs, and they may go ahead and start to look at that and have a good area for them to search and productive areas. Then you want to look at how odor may pool underneath items. It might eddy around certain things, go under the table and stuff. And so you take in all that information, decide what to do, and then you act. Now, if we look at vehicles, if we're searching around vehicles, putting our OODA loop into practice with vehicles, again, you want to observe the space and everything in it. Orient yourself to your surroundings. Any outside distractions. So all those same distractions that could affect you in an exterior search are compounded here. Eddying odor that could get and pool from one vehicle to the next. Things about undercarriages and stuff. So you need to be aware again about how odor could move in these spaces. And then again, decide from all of your experience and understanding of the space, how you approach it, and then act on that data. Finally, when we're searching containers, like if we're searching luggage, different things like that, you observe the space. The entire space is productive space, and those items that are there. Again, assess all the information that's there, any distracting odors, and what you're going to do. So ultimately, we talked about situational awareness in detective sports, we talked about Cooper's colors, growth mindset, recognition prime decision making, open and closed learning, Eiffel tongue effect, Winthrop theory, and then the steps of the OODA loop. I want to thank you for your time and this opportunity to talk to you all about how important I believe the OODA loop is to detection sports and detection in general. I'm Bill Gaskins of Integrity Noseworks. I'm out of Burlington County, New Jersey. And I want to thank you for this opportunity. Y'all take care out there, train hard, and we'll see you on the flip side.